Many of you won't know this about me, but I actually work in film as a visual effects artist. I've worked for about 10 years on all sorts of movies. And so I'm really into watching a lot of movies, which are action movies, fantasy movies, adventure, sci-fi. Those are my jam. And so one of the ones that I love a lot, that I've watched countless times over the years at different ages and still to this day love, is Highlander. Highlander is a 1986 action fantasy cult classic movie starring Christopher Lambert, also known for his role as Raiden in the 1995 video game movie Mortal Kombat.
Enough!
Clancy Brown of Starship Trooper fame. And last, but certainly not least, Sean Connery, better known as the classic beloved suave international man of mystery, Alan Quatermain in The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Then the game is on.
And I guess a couple of other movies as well. I love this movie. It hits all of the check boxes for me of 80s nostalgia, action, fantasy, romance, comedy, whether intentional or not. It just has that lightning in a bottle kind of thing that really draws me to these movies like Predator and Terminator and films like that where you're just like, fuck yeah. It has simple yet interesting lore that doesn't jump the shark, even though it's kind of ridiculous. And it has some of the best lines that I still quote to this day on a very regular basis.
You talk funny, Nash. Where are you from?
Lots of different places.
The sensation you're feeling is the quickening.
Connor.
Heather, please.
Hello, pretty. It's better to burn out than to fade away.
There can be only one.
And that Queen soundtrack, holy shit. I still play that. It is some of Queen's best songs ever. It fits so perfectly. And one of my goals as a filmmaker is to obviously write and direct my own movies and create worlds that have been influenced to me by movies that I've seen and loved as a kid. But if I had the chance to remake or reboot any movies out there and I have a top 5 list, Highlander is right at the top of that. I would make that shit with Adam Driver in a second. Hollywood, hit me up. I'd be waiting by the phone because I lost my job due to COVID and have nothing else going on. But unfortunately, we're not here to talk about Highlander. Oh no, we're going to talk about Highlander 2, The Quickening.
Outstanding!
Highlander 2, The Quickening is a fever dream of a humpback whale that is tripping on acid. It makes no sense. There are so many things wrong with this movie. It's just nonsensical decision after nonsensical decision that is hanging on a what can be barely described as a plot. Some of the craziest things about this film is that when it came out in theaters, there were 2 versions of the movie. And I'm not talking like where we have in modern day cinema where there's like the China cut where they cut out blood and gore or, you know, things like that. There were literally 2 different, completely like separate versions of this film that have completely different stories and origins. The one that came out in the US, they completely rewrote the lore of the first film where they're now aliens from the planet Zeist and they get sent to Earth to fight in the quickening for the prize. And it's described in one way that I can't tell if they're immortal on the planet and then they come to Earth mortal, or when they win they can come back and be like immortal. It doesn't make sense because depending on the version that you watch, it's described in completely different ways. And even in the version I watched, which was the director's cut, which I think is closely resembling to the Renegade cut, which we'll talk about in a minute. But the UK version stripped out all the Planet Zeiss stuff and they made it and redid some voiceover work that made it as if they were from like the past in Earth, like on Earth, and that they were sent forward in time using ancient technology. It's insane. It's insane. It's like trying to describe a dream that you didn't have, that someone else told you about while you were drunk. So the way this came about is the UK distributor gave permission to the creative team of the movie to actually make their own edit of the film, because what happened in the US was that they went so over budget that the insurance bonding agency took over the project and did their own edit of the movie. So, you know, of course it was going to turn out great.
The insurance company, who is guaranteeing the completion of the film, takes more of an interest in you than they might have had when you were not going over budget. And at one point, they stepped in and they took the picture away from the producers. And at the end of the day, the producers and the director did not have final cut and did not get to make the picture that we all started out to.
So then the UK distributor was like, nah, director, producer, you can do your own version, which I have no idea how that turned out. There's very few versions of that exist that are, other than like VHS bootlegs, which are very, very hard to find. I'm sure if I looked on the internet long enough, I would, but I don't want to. Even just watching the director's version, it's nonsense. The UK version seems to be the closest to the original vision of what the director and the producers wanted for the film, and they seem really proud of it.
This is one of those rare opportunities where we had an opportunity to basically go back, get the footage out, restore neg of scenes that were cut out, and put the film back to the way it should be.
They seem to like really like this version, like as if they saved the movie and made it like the film it was meant to be, but it's still so terrible. They filmed it with the intention of it being on this other planet, so even removing those lines of dialogue, it still doesn't look right. It looks like the world from the Chronicles of Riddick, where they have these Giga-esque statues and it's like a shithole of a desert that they live in. And if, you know, and if the rules are that you get sent back there or whatever, why would you want to go back? It looks terrible. It looks awful. I don't want to do that. I barely like going to the beach as it is. I don't want to go to a desert planet. From what I read, the director just straight up walked out of the premiere 15 minutes in when it came out and asked his name to be completely removed from the project. He was that unhappy with it. And he also allegedly said that his agent signed him onto the project without him even knowing. Because the creative team is the same team as the original movie. It's the same main actors, mostly. It's the same director. It's the same producers. So what happened? Like, how did they get this far off the mark where they had this lightning in the ball? Why rewrite any of the lore? It was so simple and perfect. Why are they like, no, actually, we're going to make them from another planet. No, actually, they're going to be from the past. It doesn't make any sense. So the version of the movie that I watched, and I watched with my friend that I made him watch this whole thing with me.
I enjoy the idea of me watching a sequel of a movie that I've never seen.
But that's the thing. You don't even have to have seen the original. Because it doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But the version I've seen is the director's cut. That is, I feel very close to the Renegade version from what I've read. The story beats sound the same. The editing, I think they just maybe did a little bit more work on the visual effects and tidied it up and changed some things. Because even the behind the scenes on the Renegade extras, some of the scenes look different with the color grade versus the version that I saw, where when they're outside, it's like red and sunny, kind of warm. It looks weird. But the version I watched, it has this horrible day for night grading done to it. So it's like just dark and blue, but clearly shot at 12 o'clock in the middle of the day. This movie is almost 30 years old, and I do not recommend that you watch it in any way whatsoever, unless you absolutely hate yourself or there's some kind of value to it of so bad it's good, because there were scenes that even reminded me of The Room.
Hey, Jimmy.
Hey, Mr. McCloud. What's kebab?
What's kebab?
Yeah, can I have a dozen red roses, please?
Oh, hi, Johnny. I didn't know it was you.
Hi, doggy.
You're my favorite customer.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Don't watch it. don't do it. Don't do it to yourself. It's not worth it. And I've watched this film now 3 times in the last few days. If I look super tired and super gross, because to get through the 3rd viewing while writing this video, I got so trashed last night just to make it through, and I feel awful right now. But I'm gonna do this video anyway so that I can move on with my life. The movie opens in silence with text on screen saying that it's the year 2024, that the ozone layer has been destroyed, and some people believe that the ozone layer has fixed itself. There's a shield that's been put over the Earth to protect it, and so these rebels are going out to try and find out the information to prove that the ozone layer is healed and there's no radiation anymore. We then get a really long shot that leads into a building with the name Opera on the front, and we go inside and we're treated to a 2-minute shot that starts on a close-up of a woman singing and goes out and all the way around a theater and eventually lands on our lead character 4 minutes into the movie. It's gonna be a long one. So the old man jolts awake and it's McCloud, and he has some of the worst old age makeup since Citizen Kane. So this guy that we learn is called Alan Naiman is sat there, and he has Dr. Cox sitting behind him looking very mad at him for some reason, and looks over waving. Okay, so I guess they know each other. We're then treated to some of the best flashbacks I've ever seen in my life, where we go back, I assume in time in this version, to when the Highlander came from, and Sean Connery shows up to tell him that a new leader is among them and will lead them, and that he will show himself, but then immediately points at him. I don't think that's how showing themselves work. Dip their hands in some goo and some sparks start flying, and then Sean Connery does the Disney Channel logo on McCloud's forehead.
Hey, I'm Hilary Duff from Lizzie McGuire, and you're watching Disney Channel.
And immediately after this, they get attacked by the main bad guy called Katana, which is the most on-the-nose name for a bad guy about a society that fights with swords ever. And they lose. They just fucking lose. Like, he just wipes them all out. So they get, appoint this new leader, and they just die instantly. It's so stupid. So McCloud and Connery, or Ramirez, as his character is known, if you've seen the first film, because, you know, spoiler alert of the first film, he died in it. So they wanted to bring back Ramirez, and that was part of the condition of getting the film made, is Sean Connery was in it again. So they had to find a way to shoehorn him back into this movie. So here you go. And they sit there, and Katana is pushing this council to execute them immediately and just completely take them out. And the council's like, no, let's exile them into the future.
The punishment for rebellion is death. Judge them guilty, and I'll execute them here, now.
Therefore, I sentence you both to this same exile. An exile into the future.
Why would you banish them into the future, free of you and everything? And they have this weird technology where they can see into the future on these screens, which we see later. And you just send them there to live a better life than they have now? It doesn't seem like exile. That seems like a glow up. Obviously, Katana is pissed.
What?
And Sean Connery says some weird throwaway line that you think,
when you need me, you'll only have to call my name. I'll always find you.
So this ancient civilization that lives in a shithole sends them forward in time to different places, I guess, and different times. They never mention that they wipe their memories either, so in the first film, they don't know each other. Ramirez shows up randomly when McCloud gets the first quickening thing, and I guess he senses it. So he shows up to train him for some reason. I don't know why he wouldn't have just, you know, obviously he's supposed to be a nice guy, but why he wouldn't show up and just kill the dude and then continue moving forward for the prize, but okay. He dies in the first film, sacrificing himself to save Heather when McCloud is gone somewhere and he's killed by the Kurgan. So in this film, he's like, show my name and I'll be there. Like, all right, but you're dead. So anyway, the council explained the rules, which kind of don't make sense. They say that they win the prize, they can live a mortal life and choose to stay in the future, or they can come back.
The last one to survive will have a choice.
Choice what choice?
Grow old and die in the future, or return here with his freedom and faith restored.
But it doesn't say if they come back that they're still immortal, or that they get to live a mortal life there. They just say that they get their freedom, or their faith is restored. And keep that in mind about the whole sending them forward and then they can choose, because that comes back and doesn't make any sense either. The fuck is the point? It's the most pointless punishments ever. You either get to live in the future where it's better, or you get to come back and be immortal and just wait it out until you're in the future when it's better. Is that it? So McCloud wakes up and the opera is over, and it cuts to him driving back into the city. So in the car, he has a TV, and there's news playing, and they talk about Alan Naiman not being available for questioning and being very isolated. But we just saw him at the opera. One, that's why he was unavailable. He was at the opera. And two, that doesn't seem very isolated. He was in literally one of the most public places that you could be in. How is that isolated? It's like they wrote every scene completely separately and then just assembled them in random orders later on of just arbitrary dialogue that doesn't make sense. Some thugs try to rob McCloud. One of them recognizes that it's McCloud, and they all freak out and get scared and run away. Like, he's like a 90-year-old dude. There's 5 of them, and there's one of him, and he can barely stand up, and they get so scared that they run away. Next, we're treated to an epic sequence where these rebels are breaking into a dam, which is meant to be the SHIELD Corporation building. We're treated to this beautifully delivered line of dialogue about fish.
Could be fish. Fish live in the lake.
And I love how they clearly used the film cameras as security footage, and it does this crash zoom into the water, showing them all just like bobbing around in there, very clearly well lit. I have no idea how none of the security guards could even see them. They then use zip lines to fly down the dam, like past all the security guards that are looking in the direction and they don't get seen. Why didn't they just slide down with the water? You know, it's the same thing. Like, what's the zip line got to do with anything? They clearly knew that they were going to need it. They clearly are familiar with the building. Why did they take a zip line? So anyway, the rebels get inside. This woman, Louise, uses a piece of gum wrapper to open a door to go in and read the radiation levels, which she finds out are normal. She's like, oh my god, the radiation levels are normal. And she says to the guy, do you know what this means? And he's like, you could tell me later.
Come on, Louise, keep moving.
But you don't know what this means.
You can tell me about it later.
Isn't the whole reason you came to this place to get the radiation? Like, wouldn't you understand and know why you're there? They somehow escape through the front door and are just suddenly half a mile away from the building, being chased by a helicopter and being shot at by security guards that went to the Stormtrooper Academy of Gunfiring. And she just ducks down behind a rock, which we don't even fully see. We just see her run towards this thing and she grabs it and it immediately cuts away. So we have no idea where she went or what she was doing or how she gets away. She just ducks down slightly. And we're now back wherever they are with Katana, who's sat with the council watching a video screen of McCloud, which again makes no sense that they can just watch video of the future. And where are these cameras? How are they seeing this? And the council is just like, McCloud hasn't made his choice yet.
Then you can also see that he hasn't made his choice yet. He still has time to come back to us.
Wonderful.
But at the beginning, they said if he wins the prize, he can stay and live a mortal life or come back. He didn't come back. It's been 40 years. I think he made his choice. The fact that he didn't come back clearly shows that he made his choice. He clearly wants to stay in the future because where he's from is fucking awful. He's sick of wearing sandals every day. So Katana decides to get his henchmen involved, and they look like the twins from the Matrix sequels.
We are getting aggravated.
Yes, we are.
and he sends them into the future to go and kill McLeod. Immediately, they point out the giant flaw in this plan.
He's an old man now. He'll be dead in a couple of weeks.
I don't care.
He's literally on his deathbed almost. Just fucking wait. And also, why did you wait 40 years? So McLeod goes into the bar, turns on the jukebox, and they play a little bit of Queen because they have to kind of remind you that, oh, this is a Highlander movie. Remember Queen? Remember the good soundtrack in the first movie that we're not going to use almost at all for the sequel? Here's a little taste of that. The news comes on again and they start talking about Louise, who is the head of the rebels and her organization called Cobalt. So they talk about Louise being a terrorist and going on about all these things, and the only thing McLeod has to say is
remains at large at this time.
Pretty girl.
Just boils her down to pretty girl, and that's it. Cut to her randomly already in the city, escaped, which we didn't see, and she pulls out a piece of paper that has McLeod's name written on it and an address, like where he is right there and then. How do they know where he is? Why would she have this written down? Why would she know exactly when he's gonna be there and all of these things? And what does that have to do with any of the stuff that we just saw her doing? So McLeod is sat there drinking with the bartender, who weirdly has just a glass of milk. And some woman comes up to him and starts yelling at him about the shield because he's involved. And she hits him with a bottle and his hand gets cut, which he just starts drinking more and not even like looking at. He just doesn't give a shit. Makes some weird joke that is barely like comprehensible.
Maybe I should get this.
But then he looks down at his hand and he starts seeing that it starts healing again, because I guess because those two henchmen are now here, he's no longer the last one. So now he's immortal again. Sure.
Oh no. Not again.
Which is exactly how I felt when I started watching a sequel of this and realized how terrible it is. So he leaves and Louise descends over this balcony or like this railing and just happens to bump into him as he's coming out the building, like perfect timing. And in one of the weirdest exchanges that you could possibly have, where these two people just meet, that it like he calls her a terrorist, and then when she asks basically why he's in a mood, she's like, oh, did somebody die? And he just replies,
unfortunately not.
What? And then she just jumps in the car with him, like what he said wasn't completely psychotic. So the twins from Matrix Reloaded show up, and they're in this alleyway that they somehow found him, and then goes off and fights these dudes in possibly the most boring sword fights you could ever capture on film, which just describes every sword fight in this movie. It's like filmed all in wide shots on tripods that barely move. The stop motion skeletons in Jason and the Argonauts are more dynamic than any of the action in this film. One of them brings a firework gun, I guess, because they keep shooting it at stuff and they're blowing up, and they try and use it on McLeod, but like they know that he can't die other than having his head cut off. So what's the point of this? Why would they bring a gun? He won't die from that. So they continue to have this fight on a catwalk that's above the ground, and a train randomly just comes through. That there's just rails that it runs through a city because of course it does. And McLeod drops down on it and the other guy follows, and he just kicks him down underneath the wheels. But then McLeod gets the quickening. Like, he has an orgasm and blows up the entire street. But he didn't kill the guy. The train did. Shouldn't the train now be immortal and have the powers of the Highlander instead? Because he didn't kill him. What are the rules in this? What are the rules? So McLeod steps out of the flames now and suddenly is a young guy again, which makes no sense why it would just reverse his age. Because, yeah, he's immortal, but, like, why would it reverse? Oh, never mind. Louise looks over at him, sees that he's a young man, gets wet. He then goes off and fights the other dude in a Back to the Future 2-esque hoverboard chase, but much, much worse.
I think that's quite good, don't you?
And he falls off his hoverboard to the ground where he lands right next to a very convenient cable that he pulls on, and it severs his head, which is like, how? He was coming in horizontal. Quickening happens again, but it's not as epic this time. McLeod just starts yelling Ramirez's name. Ramirez comes back. He just shows up. But he arrived in Scotland. Did he go back to the place where he was killed? Is that what it is? That he was reincarnated exactly where he died? Like, why would he end up in Scotland? So Louise then runs up to McLeod, sees that he's young again, and then they just bang. He just throws her against the wall in this street that trains run through and people are around, and they just start having sex against a wall with a dude that she just met less than 5 minutes ago and has said 3 lines to, which in the original cut of the film that came out in the US, this bit wasn't in, because why would it be? It's fucking weird and awkward. But the director put it back in for this movie because...
The lovemaking scene, or what I call the bang against the wall, is a scene that really wasn't in the first version. Why was it cut out? I have no idea. But, you know, it's a hot scene.
We're 40 minutes into this thing, and nothing has happened other than we've been told the lore of this film 3 times. And saw one of the most uncomfortable sex scenes in cinema. Back to Ramirez, where he's walking down the street in Scotland, and he just goes into a clothing store, demands a suit.
I would like a suit of clothes.
And he just takes off like an earring, like a pearl earring, and hands it to the guy. And the dude looks at it and goes, as if that means anything, as if he knows the value of that pearl. Like, imagine if you worked in a store, or like you worked in a coffee shop and someone walked in, you were like, oh, okay, that'll be $5, please. Oh, yes. The fuck are you supposed to do with that? You have no idea the value of it. You don't even know if it's real. Some random dude walks in off the street and hands you an earring. So then we get this Pretty Woman-esque montage of him being given whiskey and measured for a suit, and he gets this whole suit, and at the end of it he says that he has like a long journey ahead of him, and so the guy is like, do you want a limo to take you to the airport? And he has no idea what those things are, because of course he doesn't, because he's from the 1500s. But then he's just in a plane. He clearly has no money. He paid for a suit with an earring, and we're led to believe that he went to an airport, got a ticket, not having any idea or a passport, obviously, paid for that with, I don't know, another earring, maybe a nipple ring, I don't know, maybe they go for more, I'm not sure. And he's just on a plane, as if he has any concept of what any of this stuff means, as if he has any idea of geography, that he knew that America was there and existed. Pretty sure he had no idea that that's a thing, or where he's going, or names of cities, or anything, but he's on a fucking plane, on his way to McLeod. Good God. So we go back to Katana, who's still watching on the TV, and he sees that his henchmen fail.
I guess if you want something done, you have to do it yourself.
And he teleports into the future and crashes through the ground and lands on a subway cart. So then Katana makes some very odd Wizard of Oz reference.
This sure doesn't look like Kansas.
How does he know that? Is like that time travel TV that he watches? Does he just sit there and watch movies of the future? Why are they just sitting there watching TV all day, living in like a cave? But he would have no concept of what Kansas is or what that means otherwise. And like, we get it as the audience, but he wouldn't know. That doesn't make sense. So then he kills some guy for no reason. So he breaks into the driver's cabin, kills the driver, and then increases the speed to like 600 miles an hour, which then everyone in the cabin start lifting up and think like babies roll away and all this stuff. And some dude with a horrible puppet head squeezes his face like this. He looks like the shrunken head guy from Beetlejuice when they go to hell, and he just has that really tiny thing in the giant eyes. That's what he looks like. But that's not how that would work. Like, if you've ever been on a plane goes faster than this. As soon as you stand up on a plane, you don't fly to the back of the cabin. That doesn't happen. It's so random. And then he drives it all the way into a wall, and it comes like 8 feet out of the wall. Like, it was going like 700 miles an hour at that point, and it goes 8 feet into the street. So we move on from that, and McCloud is pulling up outside of the S.H.I.E.L.D. Corporation building and just goes up and into Naaman's office. And Naaman is super happy to see him. He says that he's missed him and everything. He like shines a light on him, and he doesn't even like question why he suddenly looks 35 again. He saw him at the theater like 15 hours ago, and he was just decrepit old man that could barely hold his hand up. But now he's like 35 again, and he's just like,
what have you been doing? Working out?
Yeah, squats did that. Sure. They flash back to when the shield was first being turned on. Shows that the shield goes up and it completely blocks the sun out, and now they live in perpetual night. They celebrate, they're happy, so they clearly worked on this project together. Doesn't really make any sense why McCloud would be involved, because in the first film, he's an antiques dealer. Like, that's it. That's all he did. Then we cut to Katana, who's in a taxi because he knows what taxis are. And he's riding around saying about how comfortable it is. And he has one of the most annoying drivers in the world.
My name's Jerry Pritchard, man. What do they call you?
It's quite comfortable back here. Rather like a coffin.
Right. People in this town would kill you for a nickel, man.
And he tells the guy to stop. And instead of like paying or just getting out, he smashes the window and he shoves a sword through the windshield. And the driver's like,
God damn! Whoa! Shit! Fuck! Yeah!
I'll get out here.
Oh, wow! Yeah! Out of control!
And, but he goes inside, and it's this, like, some old steel factory or something. Doesn't make any sense why he'd stop there for any reason and just set up shop and be like, yeah, I live here now. But he does. That's it. He just stays there, and that's his lair now. Meanwhile, Ramirez is on a plane chatting up some woman, and then some safety thing comes up on the TV, which is like the only self-aware part of the movie. This terrible safety video, and he's freaking out a little bit because it's showing the plane like crashing into mountains and people putting bags over their heads. Why are they showing this video halfway through the flight? Why wouldn't this be like the first thing? The filmmakers know how planes work, right? I guess not, because he paid for it with a Prince Albert piercing, I guess. We then cut to McCloud looking at the gravestone of his wife, and we get this hospital scene where she's like burnt to shit with a bandage over her eyes from the sun. I guess she just, you know, never was taught how to look at an eclipse or like use like a pinhole or anything, because she just clearly just looked at the sun. So she's in a hospital bed and just tells him to get involved with the S.H.I.E.L.D. project, as if like they really know anything about that. But like, he's just a dude. Like I said before, he's an antiques dealer. What would he even contribute? I don't get it. It's not like it's harnessing the power of the Highlander or anything. What could he possibly contribute at all? Katana's in the church and starts ribbing him and wiping his shoes and his feet on the grave, which is super disrespectful. And then McCloud creepily grabs Katana's hair and starts playing with it. But then we're reminded that they can't fight.
We must never fight on holy ground.
But the problem with this is the same problem I had with the first film. When the Kurgan's in the church and McCloud says,
I'll be out front.
But then just goes away. Why? Why didn't they just wait out front and they go outside and fight? Why did they then just go home? Like, it just then cuts to Louise going through his stuff. It just kills any momentum that the film has. Like, this could be like a really interesting thing where they have a fight outside we don't get that. We just get the whole film just comes to a crashing halt. And then it cuts back to McCloud showing up at this steam waterworks factory. So Katana just went home and he spends 2 minutes climbing stairs to get to the top of this building. And they have another slowest, most boring fight you could ever film. Lambert decided that he wanted to do all his own stunts.
He did most of the work. He did most of the fight sequences.
Michael Ironside was like, well, I'll do that too because it will help.
Michael jumped up to the plate and did it too.
But they're not swordsmen. They're not fighters. So it's just really boring and stilted because I don't think they did any training. It doesn't, if they did, it doesn't come through. So the fight goes on for less time than it took him to climb the stairs. He ends up standing on some elevator that Katana swings at and like hits, and the elevator drops all the way down to the bottom of the building, crashes down and breaks all the bones in his body, including his neck. He snaps all his bones back into place, and then he just goes home. That's it. He looks at the stairs and he's like, fuck that, I'm not doing that again. And goes back to Louise at his house, who just lives there now, I guess, and is sleeping on his couch. They should have called this movie Highlander 2: The Paddening. Why is this film an hour and 55 minutes? There's less content in this than a 20-minute episode of the TV show. So they chat and flirt for a little bit and then hear a noise or like some lights go out. Out of the shadows, someone appears and he starts having a fight with McCloud, and it turns out it's Ramirez, and they have this like really long play fight that goes on and on and on. And eventually they stop and they have a drink. And Ramirez makes this really sexist comment, I guess.
It's nice to see that some things have actually improved over the years.
Is that a dig at his ex-wife saying that they were ugly or something? Or is that just like a comment about women getting better looking in general? Like, it's such a weird comment. So Dr. Cox comes busting in of Naaman's office and confronts him about his conversation with McCloud because they could see everything. And he just threatens Naaman and walks out.
We have a fabulous place for traders.
And we come back to McCloud and Ramirez talking about the shield in the house. And Louise just shows up out of nowhere and is like,
Alan Naaman's been taken to Max.
But how would she know that? This is 1991. They don't have cell phones. They don't really have email. She's in a stranger's house that she's been living in for 3 days. How? Like, she has no contacts. How would anyone know and tell her specifically that Naaman is in a maximum security prison? Where would that information... I mean, I guess she did have a piece of paper that told her exactly the time and place where McCloud was going to be, so maybe she's psychic. For some reason, Katana shows up at the Shield Corporation building.
Hi.
And some dude attacks him to kick him out, but then he just kills him in the most unsatisfying way possible. And then starts demanding that they become business partners. So they just pull up outside of a prison that they know exactly where it is, have a very strange conversation with the security guard at the door, who calls them
jerkface.
And then we get a beautiful line from Ramirez telling us,
hit it, dude.
Which is almost on par with his infamous line from Finding Forrester.
You're the man now, dog.
They just drive right into the compound because, of course they do. There's no barrier. There's nothing stopping them. And there's a bunch of security guards there that just start firing every bullet that they have into the vehicle. And they get hit like hundreds of times. And eventually they come to a stop and they're dead. They just go straight to the trunk and open it, and Louise pops out and she's completely fine. Like, these dudes are shot to shreds from every angle through the car. The car is riddled with bullet holes and she's just fine. She just steps out. These guys don't say anything, don't do anything. They don't arrest her and then take her and the bodies to an infirmary. They obviously wake up, they knock them out, and then they go off into the building because that's how they, I guess that was their plan to get in. They run off and go into an elevator, which is yet another long elevator scene where we have to cut back to it twice. We still have 30 minutes left of this movie and nothing has happened. They find Naaman in the prison and he gives them the actual coordinates of a place that they can go above the shield and see for themselves. The shield isn't needed anymore and the ozone has fixed itself. And Katana and Dr. Cox are sat there in a security room just watching them. They watch McCloud, Louise, and Ramirez go into a vent and then lock the doors behind them. And then the fan just starts dropping down. Who designed this prison? Who designed a ventilation system like this with this specific thing in mind? Even as a prison, for people escaping, they wouldn't do this. That is such a complicated engineering task to do just in case. So, of course, Ramirez knows what to do. He shoves a sword in the ground for some reason. I originally thought that he was doing it so that basically it comes down and it will land on the sword and it will just spin. I had it in my head that's what was going to happen, because why else would he slam his sword into the ground? But he starts going on this monologue.
Most people have a full measure of life, and most people just watch it slowly drip away. But if you can summon it all at one time, in one place, you can accomplish something glorious.
And then he just gets some weird light orb and starts pushing it back up. And before he finishes doing that, like, he just goes, pew! He just opens the fucking door. Why didn't you just do that? Why did you have to do the thing with the fan? He uses all of his life force to lift the fan, even though they're already out of the vent because he opened the fucking door. And then he just dies. That's it. He just evaporates. Sean Connery was only on set for 6 days for this film. They paid him $3.5 million, and this is all we get to see. They just kill him off. He just turns into cosmic jizz. McCloud and Louise then find their way to the garage, I guess, and just jump in a random vehicle and start driving off. And Katana just steps out in front of them, and McCloud just runs him over, and she says,
Outstanding!
like, she has no idea who this guy is. She's never seen him. They've never even mentioned him to her. She's just watched the guy that she's been banging run a dude over without even questioning it, not knowing that he's immortal or anything, and is like impressed by it. These two are made for each other. They're insane. Anyway, of course, it doesn't kill Katana. It cuts to them driving through a quarry to the coordinates that Naaman gave them. But Katana is like hanging on underneath the vehicle, and he climbs back up on top of a car that is in really terrible day for night grading. Clearly they shot at lunchtime. And Katana climbs around to the front and he punches through the windshield. Doesn't touch her in any way, but she has like this very specific bloodlines coming out of her nose, which I think she was just doing cocaine as soon as he got out of the car. She has coke nose right now.
Oh, great.
So McCloud kicks Katana off and he rolls off to the side of the road and they drive away. But Katana just goes back to the office. He just goes back to Dr. Cox. How did he get back there so quickly? They get to the top of the shield above it and they look out and it's a beautiful sunny day. And we're seeing mountains and clouds and everything, and it's a very nice shot. And then you see the shield below that, but like, why is the shield intersecting with these mountains? Isn't it supposed to protect the ozone layer, which is way higher in the atmosphere? How are they flying planes? Because this would be lower than where planes are. Because I don't think there's any mountains that are that high in the US that would be more than 30,000 feet, I'm pretty sure. But we go back to the office where Katana and Dr. Cox are having an argument, and we learn how Dr. Cox got his name. And then we cut back to the shield building, which I'm pretty sure is using the same shots that we saw at the beginning of the movie, just recycled. And we don't even see McCloud and Louise break in this time. Like, we don't see any of that stuff. We barely saw it at the beginning, but now McCloud and Louise are just in the building on the roof where the beam is shooting up into the sky. They're just there. Accept it. And of course, Katana is there because just accept it. No mention of how he knew they were going there or what they would be doing there or like the time or anything. He's just there. And they have yet another boring ass sword fight, but it's still this really boring like music that's barely even music. It just sounds like mumbling. It sounds like the neighbor's kid banging on drums in the garage, and you can just hear it muffled through the walls of your house. That is how cinematic this music is. He then just grabs Katana's hand and shoves it in the beam that hurts his nummy wummies, and he's like, ah. And then McCloud hits him in the stomach with a sword and then cuts his head off and says,
oh no, not again.
No, the other one.
Heather, please.
Gets the quickening, which lasts about as long as a teenage boy on prom night. And then he just steps into the beam, which hurt Katana like a minute ago. But he just steps in and then blows his load, and it blows the roof off the whole building, which then destroys the shield, because apparently it only had one location that it was being projected from, this one place, and this satellite that he also destroys. And then the shield comes down, and it's fucking nighttime. This whole thing. How long did it take them to get from the other place? The whole point is the whole planet has been in perpetual darkness for years, like 25 years since the shield went up. And you destroy the shield, and it's nighttime. It's just more darkness. Like, yeah, you can see the stars, but like, people want to see the sun. How did plants survive in this? How did they get around that? Because they need UV. Like, the whole planet would be dead. I'm putting more thought into this than the filmmakers did, so I'm gonna move on. But you didn't think that to end it on like a sunny day where it's like, oh, it's daytime. People can see the sun for the first time in 25 years. There are people that are alive that have never seen the sun. It's such a fuck you to the entire movie, because it just more darkness, and that's it. McLeod and Louise are just stood back down next to the rock that she hid behind at the beginning, kissing, and then the movie just fucking ends. That's it. There's nothing else. What the fuck?
In Hollywood, you almost never get a chance to fix something that went wrong. And we have been lucky enough to have that chance.
That's quite good, don't you?
The reason that the first film worked so well was that the lore was simple. It was easy to understand. The build-up between the hero and the antagonist made sense, where they kind of fought each other at the beginning, and clearly the Kurgan was like super strong and powerful because McLeod hadn't been trained. He was just like a Highlander. You know, that's why the film is called that. The first film works so well because they escalated it, and then they have the climactic fight at the end where it's not the best, but it has some very interesting visuals of like the silhouette of the fight against the windows, which is then incorporated into the big explosion when he gets the quickening power, which in this film, they just blew the wad on the first time he did it on this random throwaway character. Then he immediately then fights someone else. So this whole idea that he's from back in time, or that he's even from another planet, makes no sense, and it just undermines the rest of it. Where the climactic fight, like, blink and you miss it. There's nothing special about it. It just happens and then it's done. You see stuff where they built these crazy sets and put a lot of time and effort into those, but there's almost like no effort put into the story. In the extra video, they even say that they wrote scenes around locations that they found.
When we found certain locations, we actually wrote scenes for the movie, because a lot of times you write a scene and you can't find the location.
That's why it just feels so half-assed and makes no sense. This project was clearly just a clusterfuck from beginning to end. No matter what they were going to do with it, it was doomed. There's no editing that could fix this. Like, they tried many times with the Renegade version and the director's cut and the UK version. The bones of it were just broken. They completely disregarded any of the lore set up by the first film that was just worked. Like, yeah, there's holes in it, but good enough that it would stand up to a little bit of scrutiny where you can suspend your disbelief. But this is just garbage. And the producers talk about there being extra footage that they included.
What you will find in Highlander 2, the Renegade version, is 16 minutes of added footage that totally rounds the story.
Or to really like improve it, and it doesn't. It just makes it more confusing, because you have Louise explaining the movie that completely contradicts what the council at the beginning do. It's such a bizarre thing. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like they did the best they could with what they had, but they are also the people that shot what they had and made those decisions. So I can't really give them a pass on that. Also, this film is one of the few films that has a 0% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. 0 from 24 reviews. It is insane. It just speaks volumes to the quality of this film. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. please don't watch this movie. Just don't. Learn from me. I did it 3 times, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, this is not worth your time. It certainly wasn't worth mine. Please consider subscribing if you already haven't. I would really appreciate it. Hopefully you found it funny, interesting, and would like to see more content from me. That really helps me out. Leave a comment and let me know which was your favorite part of this movie, though, if you did see it, or even just from my video of what I addressed. But yeah, thank you so much, and I'll catch you in the next one.